Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is June 6, 2022. I may publish this today or maybe tomorrow, June 7th, by the time it actually gets published. Coming on because there's a few things I want to talk about. Well, first of all, I've been away for a while. One of the things that was going on for me was my chart ruler, or the ruler of my ascendant, Aries, had been transiting my 12th house. Now that is a transit that is, for those who know astrology will understand that that's a time when your energy can be, your physical vitality and your energy can be very low. And because Mars is an action planet and the 12th house is all about internal stuff or unseen things. And so this period of time, my physical vitality was extremely low. I ended up sleeping a lot. But there's an upside, which I will get into here shortly, if one is aware of how to work with these energies. And in fact, that is what I want to talk about today, which is how to work with challenging astrological transits. Before I do that, though, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, because of course I still have been paying attention to that. It seems like the crazy meter keeps going higher and higher all the time, and you just think we're at the max peak crazy, and it gets crazier still. This week, we're going to start hearing the January 6th Commission in the United States, and as I spoke about in my USA Pluto return episode, we can expect possibly to find some things in the next while that come out that are shocking and that profoundly shape the nation and the world who will be watching. It's very evident if you're observing what's happening politically and socially in the United States that things are reaching a very high level of polarization, and the gun violence and things like that people outside of the United States look at in absolute shock and horror. This is a very peculiar thing in the United States. And I've talked about this before. Obviously, you kind of know if you've listened to any of my videos that I will rant and I'm very opinionated. That doesn't concern me. I mean, I think that my own perspective on things is that humanity needs to be striving for harmony and peace and security for all. And that is kind of in conflict with a lot of these energies of people who just want to be able to do whatever the hell they want without any concern for others. And that I think, as I said in my Pluto in Aquarius video, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, we're going to see a shift more to the left or more to the progressive side of the equation, which will be about the all versus the individuals, and specifically those who are at the top of the heap. So I'm pretty sure, or I get the sense that my strong opinions turn off some people, and that doesn't really bother me. I'm not doing this to win friends. I'm doing this just to share and possibly connect with other people of like mind who have a broader, deeper, more spiritual view of reality or the world. My own personal primary concern is the environmental crisis, which I think, even though everything else that's going on right now appears to be insane, the environmental crisis is something that we'll be dealing with for generations and has the potential, if unchecked, to literally collapse civilization and would result in the loss of countless species on this planet. And so that's an overriding concern, although I obviously still am very perturbed by a lot of the social things that are going on right now. I want to talk a little bit about that. And that is to say that, you know, when you look at it, and I think it's going to continue to get crazier as we move into the summer, and Saturn is still squaring Uranus, and Saturn is kind of the status quo, and Uranus is the need for dramatic shifts in consciousness. And sometimes experiences that will shake us literally into new levels of consciousness. And so these two energies are kind of at war with each other and will be for a while longer. Again, if you've listened to me, you know that I have a very critical perspective on what's happening in the world, everything from income disparity to, as I said, the environmental crisis to social injustice and things like that. I'm very progressive in those regards. And so one could easily assume that I have an extremely pessimistic outlook on reality. And if I just look at the evidence, yes. But if I consider it from another perspective, a higher perspective, a more spiritual perspective, I think, and I'm getting strong chills here, I think that what happens is anybody who's done any level of deep spiritual work, meditation, or, engaged in any kind of spiritual practice for any length of time, will know that the spiritual path is like the most challenging thing that you can do. It's way more difficult than even becoming rich or something like that, because you have to confront all of your own darkness, which is what trips you up on your path to progression. And so part of the spiritual path is to overcome your own demons and your own programming and your false beliefs and limiting beliefs, and how you judge yourself and how you judge others and your fears. And some of this can even be past lifetime stuff, and it often is. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But my point is that when you shine light on something, you will see all of the faults and flaws and failures in it. And there's no question that the veils are thinning here on earth now. I mean, we all know this because we're part of this spiritual community, and everybody is talking about this and experiencing it. And so that is the wild card. So when we get into really pessimistic fears, and fear is not an emotion we want to dwell in, obviously, as much as possible. But we have to consider that there's stuff happening on other levels, on the non-material levels, simultaneously, which, in fact, I'm arguing is triggering a lot of this darkness. It's becoming so evident, and it's so much in our faces, that this, I think, is part of this process of transformation that we're going through on this planet. And I've talked about that before as well. I also did an episode on the timeline split, which is another concept that could be playing out in some ways. In short, that those who are living in a fear-based paradigm, or who hadn't cleared their karma, would not make this shift into the new timeline, that there would be a split in reality. And I know from my own personal experience, I've had many experiences of multidimensional reality, where on different dimensions of reality, we can perceive and understand and experience things that we can't on others, kind of like a paradigm shift as well. And the thing is that the people who do not make the timeline shift won't even know. Those who are still living very much in fear-based paradigms will just continue to experience reality in the same way that they have. People who are judging, oppressing, persecuting, or condemning others based on race, ethnic background, religious persuasion, gender identity, economic status, cultural identity, physical appearance or abilities, or some other aspect of their reality or identity, are living in a fear-based paradigm, essentially. Because the truth is, we're all one. And I support that personally, of course, as long as people are not harming others unjustly. In the Dark Ages, and even up until and into these days, people have been persecuted for their religious or philosophical beliefs, tortured, killed, imprisoned, thrown in the gulag. And anyone who is an older soul and has incarnated on Earth before would have had experiences of this kind of persecution in past lives and carries the memory of that with them into this life. And so many of us have had traumatic experiences of being persecuted in the past, so we know what that's like. And yet, that continues to this day. People en masse are murdered and slaughtered based on ideological or religious beliefs, which to me is completely insane. That energy is leaving, and it has to leave in order for us to make this transition. And we know that the universe is very multidimensional and that there are an infinite number of parallel universes. Again, Dolores Cannon's work, which I've talked about before, reveals how multidimensional reality is. So why couldn't there be a reality that we're stepping into that requires people to be of a certain level of consciousness in order to perceive or experience that dimension? It's entirely possible from my perspective, having had multiple experiences of multidimensional reality myself. And I have also talked about multidimensional reality here on my channel as well. So my point is that it's really easy if you read the news and pay attention to what's going on in the world to go like, oh my God, this is just going, things just keep getting crazier and crazier. But just consider the fact that, like I said, this is because the energies are lifting up here. This stuff was always there. There's always been corruption. There's always been corrupt politicians. There's always been people who lusted after power and money and were inconsiderate of others and would step over anyone's backs to get what they wanted. And, we now have social media and the internet and everything. And so all of this stuff is like in our faces constantly. Yes, absolutely. There's never been a president like President Trump before. But what I'm saying is that we are being shown all of this stuff that we need to change, and we need to do it really quickly, like probably within the next number of years. And again, when Pluto goes into Aquarius, I think we will start to see things change extremely quickly. So bear that in mind. I get strong chills here too. I think Spirit wants us to not panic, to not give up, to not throw in the towel, to not become cynically resigned or stay in a state of fear, because that just adds to this crystallized energy that's here now that we need to disrupt. And how we get from here to there, it's a mystery, of course, because I'm not in the future. It might be possible, for example, that the January 6th Commission shocks Americans into an awareness about what actually has been going on and why, and that it results in some changes. Now, most of the world's population we're all at different levels of spiritual evolution. We all started at the beginning, and so it's not a judgment. It's just that there's a lot of people on this planet who are very much focused on material reality and material concerns. And there's others like me and you, I presume, we have higher concerns. We want a world of peace and love and support. There is no need for people to be suffering in the world. Literally, I've said this before, there's more than enough resources on this planet to take care of everybody and to do it in a healthy and clean way. What's happening right now is that we have all of this power and wealth concentrated into the hands of a few. And so our destiny is largely influenced by a few egotistical or materialistic people. And that needs to be completely flipped around. And again, see my video on Pluto in Aquarius. Another thing I want to add there too is that we're focusing a lot of our attention on the people who are like the bad guys. And I think that we have to recognize that there's a lot of good people in the world who are, sometimes taking great risks to try and change things. And we need to never forget, again, strong chills, we need to never forget to be aware of those people, to give them credit, to give them energy, and to support them. It's not, we're always focused on the bad guys. And it's hard not to, because it's so obscene, a lot of the stuff that's happening, but we should never forget to support each other and to support the good people. And it could be something as simple as being nice to your neighbor, or your neighbor being nice to you and being grateful for that. I also wanted to add this, which is I did a whole episode on paradigms. And I think it's a very important concept because when people have a paradigm shift, suddenly everything is different in a way that they couldn't even imagine before. Reality can suddenly change dramatically. Now, some people may go through a whole lifetime and never experience a real paradigm shift, and others may have several in a lifetime. I have had a few where everything you understood and thought you believed and everything has to be revisited and recalibrated to your new level of consciousness. It's generally a shift up. And I think we have to consider the possibility that humanity itself will go through a paradigm shift, and possibly that is what is occurring. And so, although the situation right now may seem dramatic and even possibly hopeless, it's possible that there is this kind of a shift that's going to occur, and suddenly everyone will just kind of wake up and go like, oh my God, everything's different. The old is gone. It just no longer exists. It no longer makes sense. It's out of balance. It doesn't resonate anymore. Or that there will be some significant portion of humanity that has that experience. That's possible too. And so, like I said, things might look very bleak right now, but they can change in an instant. I bring this up because it came to my mind while I was working on this video that I was told that myself, about myself, that I could change everything in an instant. And that's kind of what a paradigm shift is. So bear that in mind when we're being possibly over pessimistic about the future. That was a couple things I wanted to say. Now I want to talk about astrological transits that are challenging. Now, this was prompted by an episode I did about 3 months ago, which talked about Mars, Uranus, and the North Node conjuncting in Taurus at the beginning of August, at the end of July. And a number of people commented who had planets or points at those degrees. And, a lot of people were concerned about that. And I'm sure it's true of a lot of major transits that people might undergo or experience. And so if you're a very materialistically oriented person or ego-oriented person, and, a difficult transit comes along and changes your circumstances or your reality, that might be very difficult for you. Even if you're not a materialistic person, if you're a more spiritually oriented person, it can also be very difficult for you. As I said, I just had Mars in Pisces transit my 12th house, and it's my chart ruler. It rules my ascendant. So this hit me like a ton of bricks with my physical energy and my vitality. I ended up sleeping a lot, and I was tired all the time. I wasn't able to do a bunch of work I had planned on doing. I had to basically just do tons of rest, which is kind of exactly what you would expect, or as an astrologer, I would expect under such a transit. I'm explaining this just to set sort of the stage. Now, the upside to that, though, well, it wasn't easy, but another thing that occurred was that I found that there was a lot of very powerful emotions sort of bubbling up in me, coming to the surface and expressing itself to me, at least. I happened to be very lucky because during this time, it just so happened that I ended up spending most of this time alone in a really quiet place in the country, which is perfect for that kind of thing, perfect for that transit. It's exactly what you want to do because you're processing a lot of really deep internal stuff, and some of it you're not even conscious of. And so what happened was this stuff kept coming up in me during this period, and sometimes I would even go like, oh my God, like, where is this coming from? And I would stop and reflect on it. And then after I rested for a while, I resumed my spiritual practice, which I had stopped just because I was so busy before. And I had some absolutely incredible, really incredible, strong chills here, like life-altering, kind of paradigm-altering spiritual insights and experiences. And so, again, as you would expect, Mars in Pisces in the 12th, there's a lot of energy there on that level if you work with that energy in the way that it's intended. So if I had been trying to do something really strenuous, I would have probably failed miserably. And in fact, I did, because I ended up not doing very much. But on other levels, it was tremendously beneficial. It also made me come into awareness about deep-seated sort of anger and resentment and frustration and stuff from the past. Even beyond that, because this came up in my meditation and my spiritual practice, a lot of it, I think, whoa, strong energy here, is past life stuff that I'm not even fully conscious of, at least here now. And so working with that energy, and most of what I did was when it would come up, I would allow it to flow, or I would ground it. And I did an episode on grounding. If you want to look on my channel, you can find that there. And so I would sometimes feel just this huge release of energy. And whenever stuff came up, just let it go, ground it, let it go. It's a clearing process. So somebody who was unaware, completely unaware of all this stuff, might just be thinking like, I'm going crazy, or why is nothing going my way, or oh my God, I feel terrible, or is there something wrong with me? Or they might even think they're psychotic or something because they're having all of these weird thoughts and energies sort of enter their mind or their space, or people around them might be going on like, what is wrong with you? Those of us who are sort of more spiritually engaged can work with these energies in ways that can be tremendously beneficial. I really feel like I purged a lot of energy that was in my subconscious or my unconscious, hello, the 12th house, and had been possibly for friggin' lifetimes. And so now, as Mars moves into my first house, I begin a whole new cycle of expressing my Mars energy, and I'll be able to do it in a more pure way. It's like I've let go of a lot of baggage. Other people also have commented that there was a lot of purging going on, and I think that's because Mars was transiting Pisces. But in my case, it lines up with my 12th house, so it's kind of like extra potent for me in that regard. But we're not just material beings. So if you accept that, and I'm pretty sure most people who listen to what I talk about do, then everything that you experience, you have to sort of engage with it. You do not want to sort of be unconscious of what you're experiencing, whether you perceive it as being good or bad. Earth is school. We deliberately incarnated here to learn certain lessons and to hopefully advance. And we knew before we came what our astrology was going to be, and when we would experience periods of challenge, and when we would have to confront certain sort of issues, or when certain issues were going to be put in front of us. So on that level, none of it is accidental. There's a degree of free will, obviously, but at least we know as astrologers that there's a lot of timing that can be perceived if you know how to read an astrology chart and look at transits and progressions and things like that. And so what I'm saying is that, especially if you're somebody who's sort of more spiritually advanced or engaged, focus on what's coming up for you, whether it seems rational or not, because it probably has a purpose, and it's probably the right time to deal with that thing. And now, if you do spiritual practice, there's all kinds of techniques for working with those energies. I personally, like I said, even though physically it was a very difficult transit recently for me, Mars going through my 12th, I had some remarkably profound and potent insights. I also made some new friends on the sort of spiritual dimensions, and I advanced in terms of my psychic sensitivities, without question. Again, this is true of any kind of transit. Most people, like I said, seem to be concerned with materialistic sort of issues. That's not a primary concern for me. I could be very happy living in a little cottage in the woods. I would want an internet connection, but I would love to be able to just spend my time doing my spiritual practice and not being stressed out about reality. So I wanted to put that out there just as an example. People are afraid of change. Like, that's what they fear, I think, when they look and they see that they've got a major astrological transit coming up. A change in their status, a change in their relationships, a change in whatever, a change in them ultimately. But that's why we're here. We came here to evolve and to learn. And Earth is school. There are some souls who just come here, sort of, they're taking a break. They incarnated without a lot of challenges. But I think that the more sort of spiritually advanced you are, the more challenges you're going to experience because you're up for it. School doesn't get easier, it gets harder the further you go. That's kind of a common misunderstanding, I think. People think that, oh, I'm just going to meditate all the time, I'm going to be blissed out, and suddenly everything will be fine. It's like, yeah, well, you will probably eventually achieve a state of enlightenment, but it could take many lifetimes, and you've got a lot of garbage that you have to clear and a lot of things that you need to learn before you can achieve that state. And so that's why I say the spiritual path is the hardest thing that you can do in the world, ultimately, because you have to purge all of your own darkness, basically. So I hope that this is helpful for people somehow. I hope I've made my point. And again, as far as the world is concerned, trust me, I'm just as shocked and horrified as everybody else, especially when I read the news. But I think the world is going through a purging process. And that's why we're being confronted with all this idiocy and darkness. And it is idiocy. I've said that before. I think it probably upsets some people, but it is completely idiotic what we're doing to the planet, what we're doing to each other. We don't need to live like this. Society doesn't need to be this way. Our political systems don't need to operate this way. The people at the top are often criminals, and meanwhile, people get thrown in jail for petty crimes. And other people are committing crimes that affect millions of people, like Vladimir Putin. It's obscene and it's ridiculous. And I have no idea why we put up with it. That's something that humanity has to come to grips with. Like, why are we allowing this to happen? Not wanting to flog a dead horse, but that is really the crux of all of this. Why do we allow these things to happen? Because collectively, this is our responsibility. And until we answer that, nothing is really going to change. Thanks very much for all my new subscribers. And thanks also for some of the very thought-provoking and intelligent comments I receive. I really enjoy responding to those. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Aquarian_diary, where I tweet things that I'm reading that I find interesting or noteworthy. And I look forward to talking with you again soon. All the best and blessings on your journey.